I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. In October of 1985, a woman named Cherie Warren left work at a busy Salt Lake City office
to meet her estranged husband at a downtown auto dealership.
She never made it home. Cherie's car surfaced weeks later in Las Vegas.
In the parking lot of a hotel casino.
No one knows how it got there.
Strange. It was strange.
Both Cherie's estranged husband and her boyfriend raised suspicion for investigators.
I kind of thought that he might have done something.
But no arrests were ever made. In Cold Season 3, we dig into double lives, make new connections in the case, and examine the difficulty raised by reasonable doubt.
We want answers just as much as anyone else.
They have creeps like that now too, so nothing's changed.
That's the new Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, now available anywhere you get your podcasts.
We're listening to Charla's story about her beautiful daughter, Cassidy, who passed away from a fentanyl overdose after battling anxiety and addiction her whole adolescent life. But when you got that call, you dropped to your knees, screamed, "No, no, no." Then a lot of hurt started to begin for you.
Yeah. I guess it's that moment of the first few days are just a whirlwind of details. It's like, what do I do? And then the anger of how could you leave me with this mess, you know? I'm the one that's always cleaning up after all of it. And here I was having to figure all this stupid crap out. But yeah, I mean, eventually, you go through all the stages and they come and go, and it's a constant merry-go-round of all of those stages of grief.
And this is still somewhat new for you. I mean, she passed away 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, November 11th, 2016, 11/11. She always loved recurring numbers, by the way, so it's kind of interesting that she died on 11/11.
But you wanted to do something to kind of celebrate her life and tell your story, so you wrote a book.
Yeah. About a month after she died, I started writing just my thoughts. I didn't have any intention of writing a book. But I knew that I had all this stuff swimming around in my head and in my heart, and I wanted to just get it on paper or, device. And I didn't want to forget the details of those days following her death. For some reason, I wanted to journal it all because I knew I'd forget things and I'd forget how I felt exactly about certain things. And so I just started writing, and I had written quite a little bit, and I thought, maybe I should just turn this into a blog. I'll just go ahead and put it out online and blog it. So I did. I had never done anything like that before, but I blogged for the first year after her death. Just every so often I'd write something amusing as it would come to me, or some hard thing that I was dealing with, and, things I was learning. And then I felt like I was done writing. After about a year, it was like I felt like I had kind of graduated in a way. Not that I was done grieving her, because I'll never be finished with that. But it was like I felt like that part of my journey was at an end of the recording of it all. And the people that had been reading my blog were really, really supportive. And I had these women who had gone through the same thing, and they were contacting me and saying, "Thank you for being so raw and open and honest about your story. And it's my story too. And I feel like it's so wonderful to have someone give a voice to this stuff that we're dealing with."
You found a community.
I did. And it was beautiful and wonderful. And I felt so connected. And a lot of people at that time were saying, "Will you please publish this in a book form? I think it would be really powerful to get to a larger audience." And so I already had the material. I just needed to figure out, how do I write a book? And so I did a little research, and I found an editor, and I just made it happen.
The book is called My New Normal, A Mother's Story of Love and Loss in the Opioid Epidemic.
Yes. It's available on Amazon. It's funny, we went live on Amazon with it, not intentionally, but on 11/11 of 2019. Last year is when we published. It just so happened that we didn't have control over what day they were going to choose. Amazon was. We knew it was going to be within that couple of weeks, but when it went live, it was November 11th.
It was probably very therapeutic for you to write this. What kind of emotions are you going through? And what would you say to someone out there that maybe is in the same situation you are now or just the situation you were in?
It's interesting because I think there's so many different stages of the process of grieving someone. I've had people contact me days after their loved one has died of an overdose because they found the book or they found a post I had done on Facebook or something like that, and they want advice. And I keep saying, I don't have all the answers, but for me, the key to, I guess, to dealing with it was acceptance. That radical acceptance of my circumstances with her. I had to accept that this had happened. Because if I didn't, then I think that's when we tend to get lost in the muck of not healing the loss of a loved one.
Dr. Matt, I'm listening to her story, and so many people's stories begin just like Charla's did and Cassidy's, and they do all the things that they know or they can, and unfortunately this happens. And I mean, how do you process that? I did everything I was supposed to, and I think that's what she's talking about, the radical acceptance. You did what you could, and
yeah, acceptance there's actually a type of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, and the idea is that oftentimes, after all we can do, things still happen to us in our lives that we can't control, and the healthy way through that is by accepting the situation that we're in instead of continuing to fight it. The writing part, a couple of thoughts I have. One is the writing, the expressing of that, holding in grief and all the thoughts and feelings that go with grief can be like ingesting and holding on to poison in your body. And if you just hold it in, it eventually wears you down and breaks you down. By expressing it, by talking to someone, by talking to many people, by writing, especially writing, it's a great way of purging and getting those things out. That's probably why after about a year you felt like, I'm good, this part I'm good with. I'm kind of done with this, getting rid of those poisonous thoughts and feelings. Not that the thoughts about your daughter are poisonous, but holding them in can have that effect. Many, many people struggle with that, and that's why so many people reach out to people like you, because you're doing what they know they need to do. They're holding those feelings in. They're holding those thoughts, and they don't know what to do with this grief, and they see somebody, modeling how they're getting through, and so they want that guidance and they want that help. And sometimes all they need is encouragement from someone who's been there and done that. A therapist like myself or other doctors and people that are supportive, we can give lots of help and advice and skills and tools. But we haven't probably been through the same situation. I know I haven't. And so there is something special about hearing, even from you saying to someone, I don't know what to tell you, but this is what I've done. And vicariously, that is motivating and helpful and therapeutic for them as well. And hopefully they will do something similar by writing, sharing their story, and getting it out there. But,
you wrote a book. I started a podcast.
Right? Yeah,
it's kind of the same reason we started this podcast. Is people come up to me all the time and they'll be like, "Hey, I want what you have. What did you do?" And I go, "I'm just doing what I know."
These are like emotional pressure valves, right? And so when stress and crisis and grief and things like that happen in our lives, both emotionally and frankly physically, our bodies hold on to that stress and that pressure, and we have to have ways of releasing the pressure. And humans are social beings, and by sharing our stories and getting it out there, that's one of the most therapeutic ways that we can get to the acceptance that you're talking about, and realizing this is, I love the title of your book, A New Normal, because that indicates acceptance that this is now how life is. And even though it's not how I wanted it to turn out, it is how it is. This is what it is. And I have things I can do to live this new normal in my life.
Yeah. I think it's been interesting to looking back at the book and my writing. I've realized that I really had a lot of great tools that I didn't even maybe think were tools, but that really helped me through this whole process. And one of them was finding gratitude in every moment. Like I would be in the middle of walking my dog in the neighborhood and break down in tears because I was just so devastated at any moment because of a memory I had of Cassidy. But then I'd look around and I'd see the beautiful trees above me, or look at my beautiful golden doodle dog and think, I am the most lucky person in the world. And to find gratitude in those little things, it just changed my whole paradigm. I was able to function and to say, you know what? Yeah, I lost my daughter and things are okay. You know, it's not the end of my world. And I think for people to hear that message, I think is really important, because for some people, it feels like the end of their world. And I've seen parents who are grieving the loss of their children who have had overdoses that they just implode. They can't function. And it's heartbreaking, because I think we all have the capability to heal. So I've been sharing my story not only in the book, but since I've written the book, I've been speaking at treatment centers, and I spoke at a school for their Red Ribbon Week. I went back to Cassidy's treatment center, Sunrise, down in St. George, and I spoke to them, to the girls there. So sharing the story verbally with people that are either in recovery or just anyone really has been extremely helpful as well.
What do you remember most about Cassidy?
There was a lot about her that was really wonderful, but I think a few things that I remember about her are her beauty and her sense of humor. She was really, she had this really irreverent sense of humor, and she would always try to push my buttons to see how inappropriate she could be in public to make me embarrassed. But it's what I loved about her. You know, just always could make me laugh out loud.
She seems like an amazing girl.
She really was.
Thank you very much for stopping by and sharing your story. Dr. Matt?
Well, you know, this is very timely in that the month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month in the United States. And one of the aspects of the story, of course, what brought you here is her addiction and all that surrounded that. But it all started with a mental illness. And it's important for people to understand that mental illness comes on a continuum of severity in different things, but things like depression, things like anxiety, often are inherited or they are part of our biological makeup as we grow and develop. And you could see that at a very young age, she was suffering with anxiety, which was both mental and emotional, but really physical. Mm-hmm. And that's something that in the science of trying to understand mental illness, a lot of research goes into how can we help people who kind of are behind the eight ball from the get-go with things like anxiety, things like depression. It isn't just, I'm nervous. It's almost an indescribable experience for somebody who hasn't had severe panic, OCD, those sorts of things from such a young age. And it's no wonder that people turn to, I mean, of course, no blame for a poor little person who is just wanting to feel better and starting to experiment with alcohol and drugs. And sometimes that's able to be treated effectively and turned around. And in many cases like yours, where parents and frankly the professionals were doing everything they could, it just wasn't enough. Yep. And so I appreciate you bringing awareness not only to the addiction side of this story, but also to the mental health side of this story. Yeah. So many people need to get over the stigma of mental health. Yep. And embrace the fact that this is a biologically driven issue, right, and that we need to be doing more in terms of treatment and research for mental health issues so that our children can avoid, some of the struggles that your daughter had. I
think if we still have time, I think that stigma piece is one of the most important things that I try to share when I speak now. And that's about getting rid of that stigma. And I love that a lot of the addiction community has been talking about this change of language surrounding addiction. using the terms that we now know, like substance use disorder, instead of just saying addiction blankly, right?
Right.
Because it is a disorder. It is a chronic brain disease that the Surgeon General came out the week Cassidy died and with the report about addiction saying that it is not a moral failure. It's not a character flaw. Right. It is a chronic brain disease. So I think if we can start looking at it as such, hopefully the treatments will improve. My whole thing was that if I could have been less judgmental of Cassidy, I that's the one thing I would change. If I could have looked at her as a child suffering from diabetes or cancer, I would have treated her with more compassion. But I saw addiction, and I was judgmental, and I was probably a little harsh in my thinking.
You had the stigma. I mean,
I totally.
Yeah.
As a parent, I was embarrassed.
As we all did growing up.
Absolutely.
Right? Everybody felt that way.
It goes back to that doesn't happen to us. We're good people. That happens to bad people.
Yeah. And even language changes and it's one that we use all the time when we talk about someone not using, we say that they're clean, right?
Yeah.
But the opposite of that is dirty. So it's I think just trying to make these tiny little changes. And what if instead of saying clean, what if we said they're in remission?
And that's what we say with something like cancer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it's just those little changes that if societally, if we can do that, that's the beginning of those of the changes in treatment and insurance and things like that on a broader scale where we're clinically treating these individuals as someone who has a disease, not someone who's using drugs, right? Because that has so much judgment to it.
Removing the moral
yes,
aspect of it.
To approach it from a place of compassion and love.
I think if you can start with compassion and love, you're always a step ahead.
I totally
agree. And I
agree
feel
with
like
you.
in this process, you're 50%. We have half the solution are the scientists and the researchers and the people that are trying to understand it and create treatments that are more effective. And just in our lifetime, just since I was an undergraduate, the treatment for severe mental illness has improved so dramatically, and so there's a lot more that can happen. Yeah. The other 50% is maybe bigger because it's the awareness piece. It's changing the stigma, and so that everyone, including parents, teachers, friends, everyone in the community understands this is a disease. She's not a bad kid for making that choice.
Right.
The name of the book is My New Normal, A Mother's Story of Love and Loss in the Opioid Epidemic. And Charla, they can get that anywhere they can find books?
It's primarily on Amazon, but I think it's available in online as an ebook. A couple of local bookstores are carrying it here. The Golden Braid bookstore, Genesis bookstore, to name a few. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for stopping by and sharing your story. And we're so sorry for your loss, but we're so honored that you would come on our program and share your story.
Thanks for having me.
You're listening to Project Recovery, brought to you by useonlyasdirected.org with a 3-part solution: speak out, opt out, and of course, throw out. Project Recovery is a KSL podcast.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.